Welcome to this edition of the Astrological Weather Report, Pluto in Aquarius, Rupture and Rapture. My name is Daniel Fiverson. I regularly record astrological weather reports here on EA Zoom and post the transcripts on my website, evolutionaryastrologer.net. You can also reach me at daniel@evolutionaryastrologer.net. I encourage your feedback. My forecasts correlate the current astrological frequencies with the current state of affairs of the world, the United States in particular. My work has nothing to do with politics. My astrology examines the historic times we are passing through and the current themes as expressed through the zeitgeist. Recent history has presented us with the President of the United States facing impending indictments for tax fraud, perhaps money laundering, and potentially treason and sedition. China has now joined Russia in the war against the people of Ukraine. Dramatic climate change and its devastating effects to our normalcy, notably the drying up of the Colorado River, which supplies essential life-sustaining water to most of the Western states. And extreme gun violence, worst of all, children with guns. The news media often presents opinions and personal beliefs as facts, and devastating storms and weather patterns have created famine and civil war throughout Africa and worldwide poverty. There have also been important scientific breakthroughs and accomplishments. The James Webb Telescope, which is 100 times more powerful than Hubble, has revealed never-seen-before images of deep space. There have been new milestones in nuclear fusion and advancements in cancer treatment, and the first complete sequence of the human genome has been completed. We have hydrogen-powered trains and scalar technology that can harness life force energy. In this edition, we will travel ahead 20 years and examine the transit of Pluto through the sign of Aquarius. Just the word Pluto strikes fear into the hearts of men, and for good reason. Pluto's world is the underworld, the mythical abode of the dead. As human beings, above all else, most of us fear death, thanatophobia, death anxiety. If I told you that we don't die, I would get many different responses. It's just like when people ask me what I do, and I tell them I'm an astrologer. Sometimes their response emulates a rabbit caught in the headlights. You don't have to accept this idea or deny it. If it's true, neither of those responses will alter the fact. So far, everyone I have read for over the last 15 years has told me that they believe in reincarnation. The concept of reincarnation and life after death is fundamental to many cultures and indigenous spiritual beliefs. According to the law of energy conservation, energy cannot be created or destroyed, but is transformed from one state into another. We are not physical beings, we are energetic beings. We are not the cells and tissues of our body. We are the energy that flows through the cells and organs of our body. That energy is what we call consciousness. Death occurs when consciousness leaves the body. Not 1 minute before, not 1 minute after. Astrologically, the planet Pluto holds an energetic frequency that corresponds to what has come before, what we have brought with us from the past, the lessons, the challenges, and the gifts that we continue to work on in this lifetime. These emotional patterns are held in the subconscious and awakened in our early childhood. Mythologically, Pluto wore a helmet of invisibility when he was above ground so that he could not be seen. The subconscious as well is subliminal and invisible. Pluto was a god who felt neglected and unloved. Zeus, Neptune, and Hades were brothers. When the world was divided between them, his brothers were gifted with the lion's share. Zeus claimed rulership of the earth and sky. Neptune took ownership of the great waters of the world. Both brothers had temples erected to them and supplicants and nubile nymphs by the score. Pluto, on the other hand, was sequestered beneath the dark recesses of the earth, where no one could reach him without mortal wounding. He was lonely and envious of his brothers. So it is not unusual that he abducted Persephone as his queen. He too wanted a maiden to share his world. So all this is to say that Pluto has feelings, longings, and a soul. In fact, Pluto in the birth chart correlates directly to the soul and the deepest security desires of the soul. It is the correlation of the wave to the ocean. The ocean corresponds to the source of all that is. From the depths of the ocean, a wave emerges. In that emergence, the illusion of separation is created. The ocean is forgotten, and all the experience of being the wave remains. When we first come into human form, we too are under the illusion of being separate from all that is. Pluto is the evolutionary engine that over many lifetimes teaches us that we are not just the wave, but also the ocean. The wave that instinctively separates from the ocean is the soul's process of learning about itself. The soul's core desire is security, just like we do, just like we are. Pluto correlates to our deepest desires for security. Pluto is the engine that drives evolution forward. Pluto correlates to our karma and DNA, necessities for the self-actualization process. Karma is simply the choices we make. We reap what we sow, cause and effect. It is neither punishment nor retribution. It is simply the unfinished business carried over into this lifetime. Pluto carries that signature of that unfinished business. Pluto is the higher octave of Mars, and vice versa. Before Pluto's discovery in 1930, foreshadowing the discovery of atomic energy, Mars was the ruler of Scorpio. Pluto prescribes the deepest security needs of the soul and hands them off to Mars. Mars makes the conscious choices according to those marching orders. Pluto says jump. Mars says how high. One of the core correlations of the Pluto-Scorpio 8th house archetype is metamorphosis beyond our pre-existing limitations. There is a need to psychologically penetrate to the root causes of the limitations that affect growth, metamorphosis. Pluto, planets in Scorpio or in the 8th house go deep or go home. There is a deep psychological intention to the probe to the core of everything. People with dominant Scorpio planets often become psychologists, psychiatrists, surgeons, investigative reporters, and researchers. A fundamental teaching that is imparted through evolutionary astrology is that the soul contains two co-equal yet antithetical desires within it. One to return to source and one to separate from source. It is the interaction of these two desires within the soul that determines what we think we need and the actions that we then put into motion. In other words, desire is the determinant of evolution. The Pluto archetype also correlates with the awareness of higher sources of power. It is the desire to merge with a higher source of power as well. Evolution occurs as the soul begins to merge back with the universal creator and progressively exhausts, purges all separating desires. That's Jeffrey Wolf Green. The symbol for the constellation Aquarius is the water bearer. However, Aquarius is not associated with water. It is the fixed archetype of the air element. Aquarius can act like water because the dynamics of Aquarius wash away the past, making room for a new start. Aquarius correlates to liberation from parental and societal conditioning. It is rebellion against the rules, regulations, ethics, mores, and standards of society. It is revolution. Aquarius deconstructs the consensus reality generated in Capricorn, the previous sign in the natural zodiac. As the polarity to self-actualizing Leo, the innate expression of who we are, Aquarius correlates to the process of whom we are becoming. Aquarius correlates to pushing back against what is conceived to be the accepted norm. It manifests as alienation and rebellion. It is the anarchist. As a result, self-organizing groups coalesce around common beliefs and ideologies. In the sign of Aquarius, we develop our individuality. Aquarius correlates to what Carl Jung called the process of individuation. Yes, we are like everyone else in most ways. We have 2 arms and 2 legs, 10 fingers and 10 toes, but we also have assets that are uniquely our own, perhaps musical talent, artistic creativity, being a wordsmith, and so on. These are talents we have brought with us into this lifetime, developed over many lifetimes of discovery, development of these skills, and their mastery. Trauma is an Aquarian archetype, ruled by erratic Uranus. Aquarian energy interrupts and disrupts the normal pattern of behavior and societal structure to open the space for something new to emerge. It tears something down so that something else can arise in its place. Uranus rules electricity, all forms of electronics, and technology in general. Uranus correlates to the higher mind, in contrast to Mercury and the rational lower mind. Thoughts and ideas seem to come out of left field, seemingly impossible to manifest or develop. However, these seed thoughts are the embryos of a new social structure. On March 23rd, 2023, Pluto entered the sign of Aquarius. This is the chart for the ingress. From my perspective, the outstanding aspect of this chart is the square from Pluto to the lunar nodes. In evolutionary astrology, this is known as a skipped step. It means some vital process, development, or achievement has been skipped over for whatever reason. The resolution node is the lunar node that was transited last, in this case, the lunar south node. Pluto is the ruler of the lunar south node. This is a strong indication of unresolved karma. Asteroid Hygeia is separating from a new phase conjunction to Pluto. Hygeia is about proactive health and concerns the mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies as well as the physical body. The Sun in Aries is separating from a crescent sextile to Pluto. This crescent phase concerns the struggle of how things are actualized. The Aryan instinctive process of trial and error, which is what the first house is about, has revealed alternative paths forward, and now a choice must be made for which direction to choose. The Moon, Mercury, Jupiter, Uranus, as well as Chiron and the asteroids Asteroid and Vesta occupy all 3 decans of Aries. As Joan Didion wrote, something slouches towards Bethlehem to be born. The Moon applies to a first quarter crisis in action square to Pluto, implying stressful emotional content that will generate change. Venus in Taurus also separates from the same crisis-laden square to Pluto, implying that new values and priorities must be realized and then actualized. Mars at 29 degrees Gemini, the anaretic degree of any sign, the last degree of any sign, forms a gibbous inconjunct to Pluto. New choices must be made based on these new priorities. A new direction is imminent and charged with destiny. Dwarf planet Ceres, retrograde in Virgo, separates from a partile exact trine to Pluto. Opportunities to rebalance and achieve new social, political, and economic equilibrium will be furthered by inevitable growth through crisis and the resulting self-analysis, creating new self-awareness. Sorry. So instead of text and image descriptions of each of the previous generations, I've chosen musical selections from each of these times that reflect the frequency of the time. I can't play them for you here because then YouTube will not let me upload this video. So I've given you links to all of them. But I'll just run through a little bit about each of these generations. And I encourage you to take your time and listen to the songs that I've selected because the frequency that those songs hold correlates to the generation in which they were created. So Pluto was only discovered in 1930 as Percival Lowell searched for Planet X. It takes 248 years for Pluto to complete its orbit around the sun, between 12 to 31 years to complete its transit through a zodiacal sign. So the average 20-year transit through each sign corresponds to an entire generation of individuals coming onto the planet. Pluto in Cancer was the silent generation, 1914 to 1938. For the most part, women were Betty Crocker, men were Marlboro men, and transformations from World War to the underworld life of the 20s through the Depression to a Second World War were what underscored this generation. The Pluto and Leo generation were the baby boomers from 1938 to 1957. This generation broke the mold. Women went into the workforce. Men became secretaries and nurses. From 1956 to 1972 was the Pluto and Virgo generation, Generation V. This generation saturated the zeitgeist with exercise and health regimens and new science and technology. This generation of highly analytical individuals, Virgo inspired, incarnated into this lifetime to master lessons around humility, service, duty, criticism, analysis, and improvement, and being of service to mankind. Generation X was the Pluto and Libra generation from 1971 to 1983. Ruled by Venus, made this a period of rebirth for feminism, equality, relationships, marriage, and the judicial system. If you are a Pluto and Libra individual, you were incarnated in this lifetime to learn lessons surrounding balance, justice, and the true meaning of me versus we. Pluto in Scorpio from 1983 to 1995 was the millennials. The Pluto and Scorpio generation grew up on movies like The Lion King, where protagonists pierce through the darkness, transmuting their pain into power amidst one of the most tragic phenomenons, HIV/AIDS of the 20th century, the signature of death, power, occultism, mysticism, and sex became rooted in the collective psyche. Generation Z was the Pluto and Sagittarius generation from 96 to 2009. Fueled by larger-than-life Jupiter, this mutable fire sign's idealism for lust for life became excessive and magnified under the influence of Pluto. The quest for the bigger picture became endless inquiries via the internet, leading to a dependency and compulsive use of online services, the World Wide Web, and the beginning of the dark web. During this time, the Columbine High School massacre, the Clinton-Lewinsky sex scandal, and the president's impeachment proceedings, the death of Lady Diana, and the September 11 attacks were the backdrop to this generation coming of age. The last generation, the most frequent generation, is the Pluto and Capricorn, Generation Alpha, from 1995 to 2023. This generation came onto the planet gifted with psychism and intuition, indigo children. This generation will be tasked with the building the new earth promised by Eckhart Tolle. So past Pluto Aquarius transits have had several themes. One was religious upheaval. Martin Luther started what became the Protestant Reformation. The Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches separated from each other, and this continues to this day after 1,000 years. During this time, all of the Jews were ordered to leave England. And the Church of England breaks away from the Catholic Church, and there was the establishment of the Spanish Inquisition. But it was also the discovery of the New World by the Spanish explorers, opening up the entire planet to exploration and discovering new territories that were never thought to exist. And there was political upheaval. The Scottish independence and the Ottoman Empire was established. And also, obviously, Aquarius, scientific upheaval. As Copernicus publishes his theory that the Earth and the other planets revolve around the sun, that was heretical. There are several important outer planet cycles that are going to occur through this transit. Over the next 20 years, there will be 7 of them, 7 outer planet conjunctions. There's too much material to be crunched into this talk. So rather than try to squeeze it all into this forecast, I'm sharing the work of 6 other talented astrologers. These hyperlinks, unfortunately, will not work in the video, but I have published a complete transcript on my website. And there's also a version of this talk with the musical selections there included that I was not permitted to post on YouTube because of copyright issues. I really encourage you to take your time to look at these articles and see what these other astrologers had to say. I'm going to discuss Neptune and Eris. So Neptune and Eris will conjunct 3 times between 2037 and 2038. This is an event that only happens every 500 years, and it will occur during the current transit of Pluto in Aquarius. The Battle of Hastings and the Norman conquest of England occurred. A French king ruled England for almost 400 years, and it's a little known fact that for that entire time, French was the spoken language of England. Work began on the Great Wall of China and the walls around the Kremlin. The 100 Years' War raged in Europe between England and France. John Dee, who many of you are probably familiar with, emerged as an English mathematician, astronomer, astrologer, teacher, occultist, and alchemist. He was the court astronomer and advisor to Elizabeth I and spent much of his time on alchemy, divination, and Hermetic philosophy. The Council of Trent led to the end of the Reformation. The revolutions of 1848 were a series of political upheavals throughout Europe starting in 1848 and the most widespread revolutionary wave in European history. But within a year, reactionary forces had regained control and the revolutions collapsed. The Liberty Bell in Philadelphia was cracked while being rung for George Washington's birthday. Abolitionist Frederick Douglass wrote Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave, which brought to the attention of most Americans what the plight of the slaves in the South and of slavery. The first major wagon train headed for the American Northwest set out with 1,000 pioneers on the Oregon Trail. The West was opened, and Manifest Destiny furthered that and actually underscored that movement when President Polk announced to Congress that the Monroe Doctrine developed earlier in another administration, which was the United States foreign policy that opposed European colonialism in the Western Hemisphere, now held that any intervention in the political affairs of the Americas by foreign powers was a potentially hostile act against the United States, and that the United States should also aggressively expand into the West. Brigham Young led 148 Mormon pioneers into Salt Lake Valley, resulting in the establishment of Salt Lake City. And the California gold rush really was the impetus that drove people west, the thirst for gold, the rush for gold. The events that occurred when Pluto was in Aquarius, we know the American Revolution, which actually began when Pluto was in Capricorn, but most of the war was fought when Pluto was in Aquarius. The US Constitution was drafted and ratified. And Benedict Arnold commits treason by attempting to hand over West Point to the British. And a US senator becomes the first federal legislator to be expelled from office during an investigation against him on criminal conspiracy. And I'll leave the correlations of that to your own imagination. The Industrial Revolution was a new transition to new manufacturing processes that transitioned from going from hand production to machines. It was huge. It revolutionized, created the whole factory and industrial revolution. So what are the implications of this transit in the past? Geographic boundaries were redrawn. Religions splintered. Global awareness increased, and the world expanded through exploration. Now, I don't generally go in for predictions, but I was really tempted to with this one. So here they are. Technology will make even greater leaps forward, harnessing power from sources that have only been hinted at by Nikola Tesla. Splinter groups will unite over a common cause and become powerful political movements. We're already seeing that happen. Existing social and political aggregates will subdivide and reorganize in new ways, politically, geographically, and spiritually. And the geographic part could be quite important. Human consciousness will expand, making great leaps forward in collective awareness. And I have something to say that in the next slide. Actually, there's no slide, but I'm going to talk about that. Social and economic disruption, potentials for global conflagration, where every time the United States, Uranus has been in Gemini, the United States has gone to war, and Uranus will be in Gemini through most of this transit. And these changes will be driven by trauma and profound emotional experiences. It's too hard in the game to fathom what the development of over the next 20 years from now, but we know that Neptune correlates to the collective unconscious. It's the planet of intuition, psychism, and the four clair skills: clairaudience, hearing voices; clairvoyance, seeing images; clairsentience, recognizing feelings; and claircognizance, knowing. Joseph Selby and David Steinmetz suggested in their book, The Yugas, Keys to Understanding Our Hidden Past, Emerging Energy Age and Enlightened Future, that in the last Yuga, or Golden Age, telepathy and telekinesis were human abilities that have been lost over time. Writing developed as a result. I'm going to repeat that. What they said was that telepathy and telekinesis were human abilities that existed in the last Golden Age, 12 to 14,000 years ago, that were lost over time. And because of that, writing had to develop as a result. The combined frequencies of Uranus and Neptune will open doorways of awareness that will propel human evolution forward in ways that might seem hard to imagine today. The psychedelic revolution of the 1960s has gone mainstream in the 2020s. When Neptune, Eris, and Pluto in Aquarius commingle their energies, it could take this branch of neuroscience to a whole new level and expand the boundaries of human consciousness to limits of what we might now only imagine. This is how you can reach me. I have begun to publish transcripts of my YouTube videos on my website, evolutionaryastrology.net, if you prefer to read them. I thank you all so much for taking the time to listen to this. I hope that it was worthwhile, and you took away some of the things, some important ideas about the time space that we're moving into. Namaste. I will see you at the next astrological event.